Okay, my second part of my lecture is about Korea's trade policy and also the current world trade environment situation. And then I will conclude, and hopefully I want to have about 10 minutes of interaction with you. If you have questions, please take that opportunity to raise any kind of questions, okay? So let me show you this. Korea's trade with other regions, in other words, China, US, Japan, EU. What about other partners? I told you ASEAN is a big part of developing country partners. And then Middle East, Latin America, Russia, India, Africa. But Africa, of course, we are not doing trade much with Africa. But India is a big country, huge population. Even we have a FTA with India. But total trade is less than $20 billion, a very small amount. And what about Russia? Russia is also a very big country, but we are not doing trade very much. Latin America, huge area, including Brazil, Mexico, and everything. But total trade is slightly over $40 billion. Compared to ASEAN, ASEAN is a small region, but we are not doing very well. ASEAN, we are doing very well, I already told you. But what about the Middle East? It looked like we are doing a lot of trade, but most of the trade is importing oil from Middle East countries. But thanks to the lower oil price, our trade volume between Korea and Middle East is shrinking. But in terms of our export, we are not doing very well. So what I'm saying is here, Korean companies are concentrating on major markets, not yet other markets. Okay? That's the implication. So let me, before I take a break, let me conclude first part of my lecture, which is Korea's trade performance and Korea's trade relations with other partners. Here, three implications. I already explained a little bit. We emphasize the importance of large, advanced market, which is United States and EU. We are not doing very well compared to world average, so we have to do something special to expand our trade with EU or trade with the United States. What can government do? I mean, the trade activities are done by private enterprises, but government can help them by institutionally setting the framework using FTA. So that's why we have a Korea-EU FTA, Korea-US FTA, which was implemented quite early. In other words, Korea-EU FTA started to be implemented July 1st, 2011. Korea-US, even though we start negotiation earlier than EU, but we started a little bit late, March the 15th of 2012. That's the time I was a minister, so I have a final touch of the negotiations that we start to implement. So this is one thing. We emphasize most advanced, largest country as a trading partner. Second thing is China is growing. I told you China is a good place for processing trade. You go there using labor, manufacture goods, and export globally. But now you have to focus on China as a huge market, huge country with domestic market. Their domestic market will be growing very rapidly. That's why we thought maybe having an FTA with China is a good idea. And China also wants to have an FTA with Korea. Actually, 2012, May the 2nd, I still remember, I and Chinese trade minister together launched Korea-China FTA negotiations. But I couldn't finish. I just launched and do several rounds of negotiations, and then I stepped down because new government came in. But anyway, we have an FTA with China, which is started to be implemented December 2015. But unfortunately, the quality of FTA between Korea and China were not very high compared to Korea EU and Korea US. But anyway, we have FTA with China because we know that Chinese market will be growing rapidly. And last one is, you saw that other regions, Africa, Middle East, Latin America, Russia, India, there are large potential for Korea to expand their trade with those kind of areas. So hopefully, Korean companies, after you do a lot of work with the major partners, you should think about changing your strategy and address to other parts of the world, which is India, for example, or Middle East, or Latin America, Russia, or even Africa. Those are the potential for Korean firms to expand their trade activities with. So, Korea's trade policy, evolution of Korea's trade policy. I already told you we were so poor after the Korean War. So the political leader of the Korea, they emphasize only thing we can do is export promotion. We have to export. Otherwise, we cannot earn foreign money, which is dollar. So we have to earn dollar. Using this dollar, we can actually promote some industries. That's why in 1962 to 1972, we really emphasize trade, but we are saying export. In other words, they encourage any kind of people to export something to the world. During those time, not only plain small companies, but also we start to have large companies which are exporting to the world. They're mainly labor-intensive items, starting with the wig, and then later dress shirts, shoes, clothing, all kinds of things. Okay. While we are doing this, and also we joined the GATT in 1967. GATT is the trade organization like a WTO at the time, but Korea was so poor. Nobody paid attention whether Korea became a member of GATT or not. But anyway, for the historical record, we joined the GATT in 1967. After 10 years of export promotion, Korean government leader was thinking, if you continue to export so-called light items, shoes, clothing, that kind of stuff, how can you make your economic development? How can you make your own economy a little bit more advanced? So he changed his mind. Rather than emphasizing export, he decided to promote heavy and chemical industries. This is 1970s, so think about it that way. Today, it's not easy to do this because there are already so many countries, so many existing multinationals. But even at that time, Korea wanted to develop some heavy and chemical industries. If you want to do that, you need money. And this money you don't have at the time. So you have to borrow money from outside. In other words, from international banking or private sector, you have to borrow money. And we suggest this plan, including World Bank, all kinds of international organizations and financial institutions. Actually, they laugh at Korea. How can you do that? You are so poor. So, but our president at the time did not give up. He really emphasized many, and asked major entrepreneurs, why don't you start, these heavy industries? I will give you all kind of assistance to you. You means entrepreneurs. So, for example, the late chairman Jung Ju-young, he founded Hyundai construction company. Later, Hyundai heavy industries and Hyundai Auto. President at that time asked late Chairman Chung, why don't you borrow money and start to build ships? I mean, even Mr. Chung didn't know where you want to build a ship. No idea. But the president pushed him because you are a good entrepreneur. Why don't you go out and borrow money? So he tried to do that by visiting Japan and United States, explain we want to do this. Nobody really respond to him positively. So how can you build a ship? And he come back to Korea and report to the president, nobody is lending us money because we are, we don't have any credit, we don't have any economic development record. And president at that time, I cannot use, real words, but he really shouted at him, don't come back to Korea unless you borrow money, okay? So he kicked him out of the Blue House. So he traveled again, and then he went to UK. He was lucky enough to find a nice person at the financial institution called Barclays. I think that this company still exists. He suggests that you should contact some company which is producing all kinds of facilities, equipments, and machines for shipbuilding. So why don't you tell this idea to that company and say, if you guarantee something for me, then if I start to build the ships, I will buy your equipments, machine, and everything from you. Please recommend me to the bank so that I can borrow money. So we have a huge story. So he was able to borrow money and start to build a ship from nothing, because he didn't know when he borrowed money where you want to build a shipbuilding yard. I mean, later he find out Ulsan and then start to do this. So anyway, this heavy and chemical industrial promotion, which took place in 1970s, was a kind of miracle. I mean, many people ask me whether we can replicate this kind of idea for any kind of developing country today. I would say that no, I cannot replicate. You cannot replicate this. The situation of Korea was located at that time was different, very unique. So the president designate 4 or 5 industries: shipbuilding, machine, and steel, and petrochemical industries, electronics. He set some industries, and then for each individual entrepreneurs, you should develop this, you should develop this. One of the steel company we call POSCO is also created in the 70s. Without nothing, we create this company, and now POSCO become one of the world most competitive steel company in the world. But what I'm saying is here, the leadership is very important, and entrepreneurship is very important. At the time, all kinds of international organizations say negative things. You cannot do this. So president start to recruit Korean scholars. Korea is a small country, but still we have many people studied in the US and Europe, especially in US. They recruit scientists. They recruit economists and provide huge incentives. I remember we have an institution called KDI. I worked briefly too there. 1971, this Korea Development Institute was created. Maybe because of that, I studied economics, because I know some senior person who are invited to KDI, and he got a PhD from US universities, and his salary is about 5 times more than professor's salary. Young people in his 30s, and he's provided with an apartment, 4-bedroom apartment, free of charge. They are not giving the apartment, you are living that apartment free of charge. And then you have a full-time secretary, you have 2 master degree assistants, full-time assistants. And 2 scholars given a car with a chauffeur. So it's amazing. You have this kind of incentives. So all the Korean intellectuals who are abroad, they come back to Korea, and then they form a kind of committee, and they themselves do research. Foreign organizations, you cannot do that, but we said that we can do it. We want to be more confident in doing this ourselves. But the key thing is borrowing money. But somehow our entrepreneurs in the past are very dynamic, and they provide very interesting stories to the financial organizations. They are able to borrow money. But the key is government wrote a guarantee. If this company fails, the government will pay back the loan, which is very dangerous. Because one company borrow huge amount of money, go bankruptcy, the government should pay all the loans. What kind of money government has? Taxpayers' money. So all the people are responsible for paying back the money to the financial institutions. So it's very risky business. But what kind of other options Korea has? You are poor, nobody lends you money, the government guarantee. So we have a huge amount of borrowing, and government write up all the guarantees. So, in the late 1970s, we found out we overborrowed. We create the overcapacity of shipbuilding, steel, machine. So we are in trouble. We are on the verge of, means Korea as a whole was on the verge of bankruptcy. Then maybe we would be in most difficult situation. But luckily, coming into 1980s, except 1980, but coming into 1980s, world economy, especially U.S. economy, become booming. So there are lots of demand for machine. There are lots of demand for ships. There are lots of demand for steel. So this overcapacity, overinvested facilities of Korea become overnight become an exporting sector. So that's why I cannot easily say developing country can replicate this, because things should be quite right at the time for Korea. If this world economic recovery was not happened in the early 1980s, then Korean government will go bankruptcy. They have gone to bankruptcy, and then Korean people will suffer a lot from that kind of difficult period. Anyway, so that's the kind of 1970s. And coming into 1980s, we become much more normalized. You attend the Uruguay round and open up our economy, and we graduate from developing country status at the GATT, and we joined the OECD in 1996. That's the one-page history of our economic, industrial, and trade policy kind of evolution. Okay, so until the early 1990s, Korea didn't pay attention to free trade agreement. Korea is exporting a lot, and we are poor, so our trading partners are importing goods from Korea without much complaint. But we realized in 1993 was a very important year for Korea. I didn't know that at the time. I was working for a research organization. I was not a professor yet at Seoul National. And government called upon the meeting. We are in serious situation. The thing is, Mexico and United States and Canada form an FTA called North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Why is so important? Because Korea was heavily competing with Mexico. Because Mexico and Korea is similarly developed countries. Development stages are pretty similar to each other. Maybe Korea a little bit advanced in terms of electronics, or other things, but Mexico is very capable of manufacturing things and export those things to United States. But think about this. Mexico is below the United States. Easy to go there. And now NAFTA means Mexican products can go to US market without tariffs. So Korean companies, which are exporting hugely to US market, are concerned because our competition in the US with the Mexican products will be much more severe. So government start to think that we should have a FTA. Not directly with the United States, but some country in Latin America. Okay, so later we select with the agreement from our partner Chile was the right partner at the time. Korea-Chile FTA was the first FTA we ever had in our history. Okay, anyway, we didn't pay much attention to FTA, but coming into 1990s, we thought maybe we are doing heavy trading things, so we need FTA strategically. So that's the time we really start to form FTA. Coming into 2003, our government actually drew a roadmap. These are our plan to have an FTA, and we just actually follow that plan until now. But it's very interesting because Mexico and US has FTA with Canada, we immediately request Mexico, do you want to have an FTA with Korea? Actually, 2003, I was sent by the Korean government to Mexico to have an evaluation about the possible FTA with Korea. Mexicans say no, not directly, but if you have an FTA with Korea, then what's the benefit we are receiving? So they are very much reluctant. That reluctant position still continues until now. So we never have an FTA with Mexico, even though Korea tried many times to have a FTA with Mexico. Mexico has an FTA with Japan, but not with Korea. We tried many times, but they didn't really accept our request. So right now, that doesn't mean that Korea doesn't pay attention to WTO. We are paying attention to WTO, FTA, and also we have a regional trade agreement. I don't know whether you heard about the RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which include ASEAN plus Korea, Japan, China, and New Zealand, Australia, and India. 16 countries are negotiating, still negotiating. So Korea is actively participating. So I call that multi-track approach. In other words, Korea is doing multilateral and also regional and also bilateral, because Korea is heavily depending upon still on international trade. And we also hope that having many FTAs, maybe we can invite more foreign direct investment into Korea, which is very weak in Korea because not many foreign direct investments are coming to Korea. But anyway, these are our evolution of Korea's trade policy. And right now, we have 15 FTAs, 15, from Chile and Singapore. EFTA is European Free Trade Agreement, which is including Netherlands, Finland, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. And we have ASEAN FTA. We have Korea-India FTA, EU, Peru, US, Turkey. This is like a, in terms of timing of signing the agreement. In Canada, Australia, China, New Zealand, Vietnam, and Colombia. Among these FTAs, actually, I signed the Korea-Turkey FTA, 2012. I also signed the Korea-Colombia FTA. And I started Korea-China FTA, Korea-Vietnam FTA, and Korea-Indonesia. But anyway, these are the 15 FTAs are now being implemented. Okay, it's in effect. And here, why you don't have FTA with Japan? I mean, after Chile, the roadmap says the first country you should have FTA with is actually Japan. So we started our negotiations in 2003. But after 1 year of negotiations, no progress is made because of agricultural products. Japan and Korea, both of them are very sensitive in terms of opening up their agricultural market. And Japan is even more sensitive. So after 1 year of severe discussions, the negotiation has been suspended. And when I was a minister, I tried to resume these negotiations, but I was not able to. And still, we have no FTA with Japan. And Korea is also negotiating currently FTAs, bilateral FTA with Indonesia. It started in 2012, but we couldn't finish because Indonesia is not very enthusiastic about concluding bilateral FTA. Another FTA we started in 2012, which is, I say Korea, China, Japan, but we usually call CJK in alphabetic order, China, Japan, Korea FTA, 3-country FTA, which is very important. 3 countries are number 1, number 2, number 3rd largest trading nation in Asia. Okay, but can you imagine? It started like 6 years ago. Do you think it's moving all right, or it's moving very slow and very, you cannot have easy kind of negotiations? What do you think? It's a latter, we started, but lots of things happening, historical things, and the territory things, the security ideas. So we started, and sometimes they are meeting together for negotiations, but no conclusion. And RCEP, I just mentioned, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is 16 countries are negotiating. Actually, I participated in launching of RCEP. At that time, ministers promised to finish this negotiation by the end of 2015, but 3 years later, we still couldn't finish. But anyway, this, RCEP, some people say that this is maybe led by China, because China is not participating TPP negotiations, but actually RCEP is run by ASEAN countries, because if you look at this in ASEAN plus 6, ASEAN are the major driver of RCEP. So ASEAN never drive fast, they drive very slowly. So still we are not concluding the RCEP negotiations. What about the FTA negotiations Korea considers to join? There's only, there are several other things. We are doing, negotiation with the Mercosur, some Russia, some other things. But the most important so-called regional trade arrangement at the moment is we call CPTPP. I don't know whether you heard about TPP. Have you heard about TPP? Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, led by United States, 12 countries, very heavily pushed by Obama administration. But Trump comes in, we are withdrawing from TPP. So TPP is gone because US not participating. So what about the remaining 11 countries? They are having difficult time because now without United States, but still 11 countries decided to implement so-called TPP 11, TPP without United States. They give a new name because TPP actually include the United States. Now without United States, they cannot call it TPP. So they changed the name into CPTPP, Comprehensive and Progressive Trade Trans-Pacific Partnership. So they insert CP, which is comprehensive and progressive. So 11 countries are debating a lot whether we do that without United States or not. But I will give you final conclusion. They agree that 7 nations out of 11, if they domestically approve this agreement, then they will start implementing. They decide that way. And I think Vietnam, early this month, their party approved CPTPP as the 7th country which approved the CPTPP. So comprehensive and progressive TPP will be implemented from the end of next month. So December 30th, CPTPP will become a real one. Among 11 countries, very high level, including Vietnam, they are being implemented without the United States. Yes. Was Korea approved? No, Korea didn't participate. Yeah, Korea was not part of TPP. But because Korea had FTA with 10 countries out of 12 TPP partners, including the United States. But we don't have FTA with Japan and Mexico. In all other countries, we have bilateral FTA. So that's why we didn't participate in CPTPP. But now, CPTPP is strongly led by Japan and Australia. They are eager to invite Korea into CPTPP. The Korean government should decide. But the thing is, this is one of the things I want to tell you later, but CPTPP members are now making a very clear process of accepting new members. Okay? So CPTPP, 11 countries now implementing the agreement from December 30th. And then soon, after they start implementing, they open up for additional members. Okay? So then you have to have a precise process, how you invite new members, how you negotiate, all kinds of things. Then there are great potential for new members into CPTPP. For example, Korea is one candidate, and Indonesia and Thailand already show their willingness. I don't know whether they can negotiate successfully or not, because it is a high standard FTA. Indonesia, maybe, they say they want to join, but it's difficult to, satisfy all the requirements. And interestingly, UK want to join CPTPP because they are considering after they exit from EU, UK become single entity, single country. So they can do whatever they want. So UK, interestingly, want to join CPTPP. And sometimes President Trump says, well, I may go back to TPP. But the other day, and the next day, oh no, I don't want to go back to CPTPP. But so it is interesting, but this is the situation. Okay, these green colors are our partners. Okay, so Indonesia, we are doing some negotiations yet, but very, very broad coverage, including United States, Canada, Colombia, Peru, Chile, and China, ASEAN, Vietnam, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, EFTA, Turkey, India, and EU. Very big, right? Very big FTA partners. So let me say some implication of our FTA network. First, Korea is a unique country that has FTA with both major advanced economies like the US and EU at the same time. Our competitors, Korea's competitors are Japan, China, and Taiwan, maybe Singapore, some European countries. But among the major trading nations, Korea is a unique country which has both FTA with both US and EU. And also we have FTA with large emerging economies, which is China, ASEAN, India, Turkey. So if you look at the next sentences, Korea provides extensive market access opportunities to enter into our FTA partner economies. 15 FTAs, but if you count the individual countries, altogether 52 countries, 52. If you add GDP of 52 our partners, Korea's GDP was 1.9% of the world GDP. Our partners, if you add them together, 73.2% of the world GDP. This is like number third, following Chile and Peru. Chile's FTA partners, if you add them together, 95%. So Chile is about to mention, oh, we don't have to have FTA. We have a completely free trade nation with all nations because already 95% is doing free trade. But anyway, Korea is having a huge FTA network. But at the moment, we are not fully utilizing this FTA network. Another implication, I told you that Korea is depending upon trade. But I show you the performance, all kinds of things. But we have many difficulties or weak points regarding our trade. First of all, many, maybe 70 or 80% of our trade is done by big companies, large companies. For example, out of $500 billion export, 20% are semiconductors, led by Samsung and LG or Hynix. So if you count the number of major exporting items, it's less than 10. Okay, semiconductors, shipbuilding, and automobiles, and smart TVs, smartphones. You count that, but major exports are limited under 10 items, and most of the exports are done by large companies. And large companies, what do they do? Large companies are now investing in foreign countries for assembling and production. They used to export to China. They are now exporting, they are investing in China. Now they are investing in Indonesia and Vietnam, doing assembly or production. That means large companies, so-called, we call chaebols, they are not providing good jobs for young people, especially college graduates. They don't hire very much because they are now operating in Vietnam. Only thing they produce is very high-tech parts and components and materials. Who can produce? Not simple labor. They produce by the special engineers, and they are creating R&D center. So they are not producing normal product in the normal factories. They are concentrating on high-tech area. So they don't need kind of good young labor force coming out of colleges. So in terms of providing jobs in Korea, the big companies' role is almost ending. Who can create jobs? Small and medium-sized companies. We emphasize this for the last 40 years. But still, who are exporting? Only major multinationals. So what I'm saying is here, now Korea has FTA network, which combined 73.2% of the world GDP. We can go easily to that market. Why not small and medium-sized companies start to export to those kind of companies using FTA network, which is giving them more benefit than other countries' small and medium-sized companies, which don't have FTAs. So what I'm saying is here, you often hear about the global value chain, right? What I'm saying is here, you don't have to export final items. You have to be in one of the global value chain segment globally. Then even though a small company can produce small items, you can actually cover worldwide markets. Then who want to work for small companies? College graduates, they are eager to work there because you have to do marketing, you have to visit other countries. These small companies become global companies, even though you are selling very small items. So we are really emphasizing we have to help small and medium-sized companies who can utilize FTA. Even if you want to utilize FTA, it is costly because you have to make a pamphlet in English and foreign languages, and also you have to certify rules of origin documents, which is not easy to write, and you have to hire some accountant, lawyer. It is not easy. So we have to help small and medium-sized companies so that they can sell their own items globally, Latin America or Middle East. You are starting that way, then you can provide good jobs to the young people. At the same time, you can diversify our export items. In addition to the items large countries used to produce and export, now developing countries are exporting many things. For example, Taiwan. Taiwan has no major multinational, but globally, they are participating in many different activities. But all of them are small and medium-sized companies. So why not Korean small and medium companies to produce and sell some goods globally? You don't have to sell final goods. You can produce nice small items, and you can be a global company. Then actually, they can create very good jobs for young people in Korea. Another implication is you have a FTA hub, FTA network. That means if foreign company invest in Korea, well, our wages are very high. I know that. And we have a lot of regulations. Real estate housing prices are very high. So we have some kind of disadvantageous kind of aspect of the economy, but also at the same time, we have an attractive aspect too. We have a very advanced, ICT industries, information technology, and we protect our intellectual property right very safely. And we have a very nice networks using this FTA. So we invite foreign companies to come. For example, foreign company from Germany, if they establish some factories or something like that, they can use our FTA. our FTA with China, FTA with the United States. Japanese company invest in Korea, they can use our FTA. They can use our FTA with China. They can use our FTA with the United States and EU. But anyway, so we have to actually not advertise, but we have to emphasize that Korea is a country which is doing a lot of trade, but at the same time we are nicely, widely connected with the world economy through our FTAs. Then, foreign companies are investing in Korea. Then, they bring their own people, but they have to hire some people locally. Who they will hire? Somebody who can speak foreign languages, somebody who can understand the world economy. So college graduate or the graduate of international studies or something. So it's a good source for providing good job opportunities in Korea. So because I'm a trade person, I work for the government, so I really emphasize that to increase our economic growth, to provide more job opportunities for young people. Using FTA by SMEs is very, very key. And also you have to invite foreign companies to Korea so that they can actually operate in Korea and then they can hire good people, young people in Korea. This is another good implication I want to emphasize.